the technical hitches there, but hopefully we're over those now. So yes, basically what we're going to talk about tonight are just to just sort of summarise what the benefits of the scheme, a bit of history, current challenges, construction issues. I mean, construction is obviously happened a few years ago, but I think probably this group will be interested in some of the issues we had. So I'll run through that as well, and then just a few minutes on sort of proposed network extensions going forward. Um, just as a let me just sorry just uh, as the next there we go. Is it next slide come up now?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. So just as a bit of background, obviously, tram systems in Nottingham, although Net Phase 1 opened in 2004, obviously there were systems going back many decades, and this picture just shows sort of a slide of the old Market Square, so looking up towards Market Street and the theatre from 1909. Obviously looks very busy, lots going on. Um, so there was a history, but obviously everything came out, and it was really only the 1980s and 1990s when it started looking at um, trams again. Um, so the Nottingham system was the fourth of the new wave of tram systems to get developed, and I think one of the benefits we would say is that is by being fourth, we could learn from some of the issues that came up on the first few, and I think maybe to design out potentially some of the problems that emerged. I mean, obviously we all know the Manchester system was the first to be developed, and obviously they sort of used to start with all the old railway lines, and some of the infrastructure as a consequence that sort of goes on street is sort of more like railway infrastructure. So you've obviously got these high platforms sort of on in the street scene, which does make for some sort of local issues in the street environment. So it's really all based on heavy sort of heavy rail corridors, and Sheffield as well. Whilst it has turned it around, it had a very bumpy start. So it suffered from low patronage early on. There was some issues with route planning. There were large flats that close to some of the tram stops that were knocked down in the 90s, just when the scheme was being built. Lack of signal priority, issues with competition with buses, etc., and no park and ride sites. And so it did have a rocky start, originally operated by the local authority, but went out obviously later to Stagecoach to operate. So sort of mainly those two, because by the time so Midland Metro Croydon came on stream, we were very close to letting contract, and the first system sort of came about. The first line sort of opened in 2004. So we've now got a network of three lines on the system. The line, so we've got Nottingham City Centre in the middle there, and then the line to the north to Bulwell, Hucknall, Cinder Hill was the first one that opened in 2004, and that one does use it uses the heavy rail corridor, the Robin Hood Line corridor, in parallel to the to the railway line. But it doesn't sort of use the former railway infrastructure, so it is a low floor system. And then 2015, the line sort of to the south to Clifton and to the southwest to Chilwell were open. These had different sort of characteristics. The Hucknall line is very much sort of a sort of suburban to city centre route, but with obviously with the city centre link. The Clifton line again followed a similar scenario with using the former rail corridor alongside Compton Acres. but the line to Chilwell's got a very different sort of characteristics. It links a lot of attractors along the route. It's got sort of the Royal Ordnance Factory, the NG2 industrial estate, which was the former Royal Ordnance Factory, obviously the university and the hospital, Beeston Town Centre, and then obviously close to Junction 25 with a substantial park and ride site. So on that line, you get a lot more sort of travel in both directions, whereas the other two are mainly sort of from suburban to city centre. Before COVID, there was a real increase in patronage. The patronage sort of peaked at about 19 million leading up to March 2020, and was really growing at the time, which was sort of coming towards expectation. I'll come on to COVID later, but that's obviously had a significant impact. And the current contract sort of is with a company called Tramlink and runs until 2034. So just a few sort of key stats on the network. So it's 32 kilometres total. There are 37 trams. There are two types of vehicle. With Line 1, there was the Incentro from Bombardier at the time, and Phase 2 is a Citadis tram from Alstom. And so both are maintained at the Wilkinson Street depot. There are 51 tram stops, 7 park and ride sites with about 5,500 spaces, and cost about 650 million between the lines. This is going back, that's 20 million a kilometre basically. That's obviously going back a long time. I think current estimates per kilometre nearer sort of 30 to 40 million. And the reason the council promoted the system, sort of summarised really in this slide. I won't go through in too much detail, but there are a series of objectives around developing it, particularly at the time around reducing congestion and attracting inward investment and creating jobs. To a lesser extent, also supporting land use policy. That's become more important over time, linking to key developments. And I think any future routes will definitely have that at the heart of any new scheme. And then more and more important has obviously been the issues around CO2 and reduced carbon emissions. And obviously the system, particularly point of use, is good on that side of it. And then really important, accessibility and social exclusion. Nottingham's got one of the highest percentages of population without access to a car, and so obviously public transport becomes one of the most important parts of the city's infrastructure to deal with that. And the main benefits, some of the main benefits of the system, well, in terms of economic growth, it does link to the three largest employers in Greater Nottingham, and 20 of the 30 largest as well have offices or are located within 800 metres of a tram stop, and it's projected to sort of bring substantial employment growth over the length of the time that the system will be there. So it's really got economic benefits, and perhaps one of the key successes has been that about 30% of users were former car users or use park and ride. So the objective of dealing with congestion and modal shift is something that it has been successful with. So the arguments around congestion, congestion doesn't go away, of course, but what at least it does do is it adds capacity to the system, and people make their decisions really based on people changing their journey behaviour and creating space in the network overall. So it does sort of increase the ability to travel, which has sort of consequential economic benefits. So just some of the very simple benefits, sort of factors that make the system successful. Maybe, some of these we learned from the early developments at Manchester and Sheffield, but some fairly apparent. So obviously a high capacity system can take over 200 people per vehicle. Um, it it, um, it operates flexibly, so we get sections off street where space allows, but developing something in a constrained sort of city where you haven't got natural rail corridors in most parts of it, sometimes you have to share road space. And I think one of the key factors in sort of designing a route is that you've got to maximise your segregated running. So overall, the system has got about 60% segregated running, but it's also got over 20% of running on sort of on secondary roads. The absolute critical thing is to avoid running on sort of busy A roads as much as possible, and it really does very little of that. There are sections, for example, on the Beeston route where you have to run it on Chilwell Road, which is a tight, sometimes congested road. But if you take the whole length of that route from the Totem Park and Ride into the city centre, very little of it actually interacts with any busy roads, and that's what gives it obviously the advantage and makes it more attractive than other options on the system. It's some people who live near it might disagree, but overall it is environmentally friendly. It's relatively low noise. I think that we do have problems with wheel squeal on corners, but I think when it's running on the straights, it's generally lower noise than heavy rail. And of course, running through the city centre is one of its main benefits. It has whereas most traffic has been, most vehicles have been taken out of the city centre, and buses to some degree have been moved to the periphery. Trams allowed sort of a route right through the heart, and it sort of fits naturally with the pedestrianised environment. People feel comfortable with trams running through, and obviously emission free as well. And then accessible. I mean, all public transport now is much better than it was, but I think market research would suggest that particularly fixed rail infrastructure is particularly accessible. People know on the platform where to stand. You've got wide doors. There's no gaps. It's all low floor, and in terms of satisfaction, surveys had some very high marks from people who find out those particular characteristics helpful. And importantly, safe as well. I mean, there's CCTV and help points on platforms, CCTV in the vehicles as well. So there are incidents. There has mainly to do with antisocial behaviour, and there are sort of partnerships being developed with the police to try and deal with some of that. But it's very localised, and it's probably a small number of people who are responsible. But generally speaking, it's a system that's designed for all people to be comfortable using it. And it's popular with developers. So since Line 1 opened, all 6 of the city centre tram stops have had sort of development next door. And whilst in surveys and talking to developers, anecdotally, they would say that whilst it's not the only reason why decisions to locate next to tram stops are made, it is a factor in locational decisions that have been made that have contributed to some of the new developments that there have been in the city over the last 10 years or so. And I mentioned earlier, traffic priority is one of the key factors in the success. So as well as keeping tram segregated and off main roads, it's absolutely critical that when it does interact, that the tram gets priority over all other modes. And on the entire system, there's only one junction where there isn't automatic priority for the tram, which just obviously helps keep a reliable service. Integration with other public transport again is key. There are direct links at 3 railway stations and integration with bus services. And one of the key areas of development is the interoperability for ticketing. There's the Robin Hood card where you can use that to travel on all bus and tram and heavy rail services within Greater Nottingham. And there's a variety of ticket options available on that. And more recently, there's now multi-operator contactless travel available. So between tram and NCT and local link buses, if you use a contactless card and you just tap on each one, you could there's a day cap, so which is about 2.5 times the number of journeys you'd take. Then you get unlimited travel after that. We're looking to expand the contactless multi-operator, both in terms of times it's available and the number of operators. At the moment, because of different ticket machines, some operators can't be part of the scheme, but there is a sort of national scheme which the government are promoting called Project Coral, which is trying to sort of overcome that and basically create a platform for different ticket machines to talk to each other. So you can use sort of contactless cards across all operators and have it as one product and with one cap. So that's what we're working towards at the moment. And then just sort of to highlight the points around the interchange benefits. So got the tram stop at the Nottingham station over the top of the station. When line 1 was built, it was just to the north of the station, but when it was extended south, that tram stop was closed and a new tram stop was built with direct access down into the station concourse and also to the new multi-storey car park. And then bus interchanges are mentioned. So picture on the right is Hucknall, where you've got bus, tram and train all in one location, and on the left is Beeston, where I think we think that the platform there is the first sort of bus tram platform built in the country when that opened in 2015. And then Park and Ride. So Park and Ride has been a massive part of the system, and there are 7 sites with 5,500 spaces. Up to COVID, there were problems with too many users, and a couple of the sites, the car parks are getting full sort of about between 8 and 9 in the morning, which was a real problem, because if people can't be guaranteed to get a place, they're going to change their travel behaviour. So we were looking at, we got money to actually increase the capacity at both Hucknall and Phoenix Park and Rides to grow the usage there. But unfortunately, COVID has affected Park and Ride travel probably more than anything else, to come on to in a few minutes. And so those schemes, unfortunately, are not now going to go ahead, as I think the new, so looking at the business case now, there just isn't sufficient demand to warrant that. So that is one of the major impacts that COVID's had on the system. But overall, sort of bringing all those factors together, the system does score very highly on customer satisfaction. So most recent scores were 89% satisfied the service, 91% recommend to friends, so really, really high. And we heard last week that Institute of Highways do an annual survey of all 111 local authorities in the area of the quality of their public transport, and Nottingham actually came out top of that. Something we'll do some media on after the election next week. We've got local elections, but the tram with buses together, combined with sort of low car ownership, it really is a public transport city, and I think that reflected in the survey that Institute of Transport have done. So just to finish off really, sorry, apologies, that slide's actually slightly out of place, but it's just highlighting the point made earlier that employers have really got into sort of the benefits of the tram to their employees. Just the picture on the right, when NG2 has been developed, they really developed the fact that they really played on the fact that they were going to be connected by the tram route, and the development mostly has been really quite successful. So just changing tack slightly then, just to move on to the structure of the project. So it's a PFI scheme. What that essentially means is that when the contract was let in 2011 for the second phase, a special purpose vehicle, a new company was created called Tramlink, and they basically took on all the risk for building the system and then operating it until 2034. So it was a 23-year contract. And so the way it works is that they had to raise capital to build the system. So they had a series of lenders, of banks, so, international banks lending the money. So they spent 3 years, ended up as 3 years and 8 months developing the system, and then over the rest of the operation, they get money back through two sources. So one of the sources, obviously, the fare box. So Tramlink take all the risk on patronage and fares, and the second way they get money back is through performance payments. So it's payments made by the council to Tramlink on the basis of their performance each month. So they've got a series of performance indicators that they've got to satisfy, and if they do that, they get paid, and they basically use the money to pay back their debts to the banks, and obviously the aim then is to make a profit, and for shareholders who've invested in the project as well to make a return on that investment. So I'll come on to that bit in just a few minutes again, but the way the structure worked, Tramlink, so were the created company, and they subcontracted the construction and tram side of it to Taylor Woodrow, who were part of the Vinci Group, and Alstom, and they then had an operating subcontractor called Nottingham Trams Limited, who now operate the service, who are principally made up of the Keolis Group, who I'm sure you'll all be familiar with, an international sort of public transport operator, partly owned, I think, by the French state. So that's the structure. As I've just sort of said, that Tramlink receives these monthly payments from us based on performance, and the way we fund that is we get to what's called PFI credits from central government, and they contribute about 2/3 of the payment that's made to Tramlink, but the other third has to be from a local source, and that was sort of a requirement of getting government funding at the time this contract was let, and the way that the council raises that money is through the workplace parking levy, which was put in, I think, in 2009, I think it was. And obviously, something quite controversial. We remain the only authority in the country who has introduced a workplace parking levy. Others have looked at it. Leicester got quite close to it recently, but they put that on hold at the moment. But essentially, what the scheme does is it charges employers for their parking spaces for those who've got 11 or more places on their sites. There are various discounts or incentives where you if you to develop travel plans and other ways to reduce it, but essentially it is a charge on private workplaces to be able to then allow a ring-fenced fund for sustainable transport in the city. So about 80% of the workplace parking levy income goes on paying the trams of performance payments, and the rest of it goes on things like the link bus network, and it also contributes to the Nottingham station refurbishment that was done a few years ago. We had to borrow money to pay for that, and we're still paying that back by using workplace parking levy funding. So I think one of the reasons we were able to do it is perhaps the politics it's a very political issue, and the politics in Nottingham are very we've got an overwhelming majority for the leading group, and perhaps that means that it can take more difficult decisions on issues such as this to get them passed through. So in terms of the performance monitoring mentioned, this slide just summarises the main factors that are looked at, but probably the top line is the absolute key one. So 85% of the payments for performance are based on the reliability and punctuality of the system. So the operator then is heavily incentivized to operate really good quality service. I mean, our view would be that this works. I mean, we understand how the operator acts, and it is the whole setup is designed around making sure that the system runs as it should. I think it is a lot to do with this incentivization that's within the contract structure. Moving on to sort of talking about a few of the challenges then that the system has. I mean, by and large, because of the performance regime, it does operate a good level of service. It operates every 7 to 10 minutes roughly on each leg, which means in the central core it's sort of every 3 to 5 minutes. So it's a really high frequency, just turn up and go service. There have been problems recently with issues such as the tram vehicle performance. There have been a number of vehicles out service which has brought it below to the number required to run the full timetable. There was also a period when they were short on staff. This has been a national problem for transport providers, which also hit the tram operator. And there have been problems with antisocial behaviour, as I mentioned earlier. But by and large, it does operate to a good level of performance, which allows the operator to get most of the performance payments it should. There's obviously issues outside of the operator's control as well, that if there's a road traffic collision or accident which affects service, that's something they have to take the hit for. And you do get things like this that happen that really they can't legislate for. So this is a junction on Lenton Lane, between Lenton Lane and the NG2 Business Park, where for a long time perhaps because of the direction of how the roads diverge on Lenton Lane, there was a whole series of episodes of cars sort of going up onto the bridge, and because of the trap form, they were never going to get to the other side, but kept going and then got stuck. And so the tram operators now got a process ready to remove a car whenever it comes in, and the signing's been much improved in the area. And more recently, people may have seen on the news the burst water main in Chilwell, which was right next to the tram route, which led to major disruption for 2 days, all on the system. And that's something that the operator just got the risk for. They'll lose the revenue and the operating performance when that sort of incident happens. And then so the impacts, which I've referred to a couple of times, of the pandemic and cost of living crisis, it has had a significant impact on the operation. There've been changed commuting habits, so much more hybrid working now. You now get a pattern on different pattern on different days of the week. The old sort of Monday to Friday habit has gone, and Mondays are different to Tuesdays, they're different to Thursdays, and so on. So you're getting very different operational patterns, which I think in time may lead to different services on different days of the week, but haven't quite got there yet. And research has suggested that because of this more flexible way of working, that there has been increased car use and more flexible ticket purchases. So the days of people buying a season ticket and using that every day seem to have been gone. There's been the sale of season tickets has dropped through the floor. And that's not just the tram; it's local bus operators have had the same. Interesting enough, you'll probably be aware that there is a national initiative which has allowed bus services to offer single fares at £2, which wasn't extended to tram systems, which wasn't something that we were very happy about. We've done a lot of lobbying, but unsuccessfully. But one of Tramlink's responses to that was in January to offer a season ticket for the year for basically £1 a day, £365 season ticket, about a 40% saving on the normal price. And whereas I think they sold eight tickets in January the year before, eight annual tickets, and this January they sold over 1,000. So obviously, if you make it cheap enough, you'll sell, but it's kind of part of the marketing and ticketing approach that are going to have to be much more agile going forward, really understanding the market and not relying just on traditional sort of ticket products that we've always had. One other interesting sort of development on ticketing is that there's much more use of sort of contactless on and off on public transport than perhaps might have been expected. That it's rarely the cheapest product, and yet people choose to use it. Partly because it is there for convenience and it's easy just to flash your card. Partly it could be a cost of living thing where people don't want to invest in longer term tickets, the cost of it, and they're just spending as they've got money. But what it does do, of course, is mean to the operators is a higher yield per passenger. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't bring buy-in, long-term buy-in to your product. So it is something they're looking at. One thing we are trying to push is on the Robin Hood card, something called a flexible day ticket, where it's more of a you buy 50 days and you can use that over time, rather than, so if you are only traveling in twice a week, you get a discount on that, rather than obviously the traditional 7-day ticket. But we've not sold that many of those, so we're certainly looking to promote that much more in the next few months. And then just the final point there, Park and Ride, as I said, really has been the major um, sort of area that's been affected on the tram. And I think one of the interesting factors is that um, tram use has probably peaked now at about 80% of what it was pre-COVID, whereas bus is higher than that. It's been near 85 to 90, and that's a common theme. Um, Apart from the West Midlands, which has a different demographic, but it's a common theme across other systems where tram hasn't recovered as much, and that probably suggests there are sort of other demographic reasons for that. That the type of user of a tram perhaps is the type who might be more inclined to park and ride, to be hybrid working now than a bus, which may make that sort of 10-15% difference in use. Why perhaps trams lost out a bit more. So so the combination of the sort of loss of patronage and um, the the increase in energy costs, because of course the electricity costs have shot through the roof, and obviously a tram system's a high user, um, has put Tramlink into some issues financially. Obviously their income has reduced and their costs have increased. Doesn't Obviously that doesn't lend itself to a healthy financial picture. And so over the last few months, there's been sort of extensive discussions between the banks, the shareholders, the council, and Tramlink as to maybe how to sort of restructure the finances of the whole scheme to give it some stability. Um, Now those conversations are all still going on. I mean, they're all they're going reasonably positively, and we are hopeful that position between all parties can be worked out to give that stability and allow the system to go forward. The aim really is to try and there are payments, loan repayments that need to be made on a monthly basis to try and sort of reduce twice a year, 6 monthly basis, to try and reduce the amount and lengthen the time that they need to be repaid. And that's sort of currently the discussion that's going on. But that really, I think before COVID, it was all going well. It was reasonably stable, but it's just been knocked. That the finance has just been knocked um, by that. And apart from Sheffield, Nottingham's the only one which has got private sector risk in the how it's structured. The other systems are all public sector risk. So this one does stand out a bit as one where it could have gone under, but fortunately it seems we seem to have moved away from that risk the way it's looking at the moment, which is good news. Okay, and then what I thought I'd go on to is just run through a few slides about some of the construction challenges for phase two. It was a few years ago, but it's still quite interesting, some of what needed doing. So just sort of summarise there some of the big construction issues. 17 kilometres double track, 10 structures, lots of tram stops, 50 million utility diversions, involving so many companies, real problems with that side of it, one of the big risk areas. 80 properties demolished, 500 land plots CPO'd, which had to be sort of taken at the right time to make sure it didn't impede the construction. So very significant land acquisition program as well. So it was a challenging period. It took 3 years and 8 months. It was 8 months late overall. Probably utility diversions was the main reason for that more than anything. It was just so difficult to control the different utility companies and to organise it. I think the probably the construction side of it, maybe more program management would have helped as well. But it was a very challenging construction period, and it did obviously have significant local impacts as well, which we'll touch on briefly. Um, Although it says construction cost 500 million at the bottom, I think that's sort of the public sector contribution. But I think it's our understanding that the construction arm did make quite a significant loss on this scheme, and so the actual cost was probably quite a bit higher than that. So as I mentioned there, we needed to do a huge amount of site clearance and demolition, 80 demolitions on the left-hand side there. That's just Arkwright Street, just south of Nottingham Station. The space there was actually needed to construct the structures over Nottingham Station, which come on to in a minute. The site is actually still empty. It's been for sale for some time, and there's very nearly a deal done with University of Nottingham to move in there, but that fell away. But there is potentially a development site there, which will hopefully come forward at some stage. On the right hand side, that's the former multi-storey car park at Beeston. I think there was a general view that was a welcome, that us taking it down was helpful for local borough council, and they've completely transformed the centre of Beeston since then with a development adjacent to the tram stop, which it's got a cinema and various other facilities and some accommodation within it. So yeah, utility diversions, sort of one of the major risk areas, really complicated and really difficult for local environments. Digging up streets for weeks on end. Sometimes utility companies coming along doing work, then covering it up. Another one coming and uncovering. It could have been more efficient, and I think some of the lessons learned work that we did sort of really identified this as an area that you could look at doing sort of pre-contract utility works if you could perhaps isolate this away from the programme, as there was some substantial knock-ons to other parts of the programme just by the difficulty of utility diversions. You can see it, it meant that centres such as Clifton and Beeston had major disruption for a year or more, which really did affect local businesses. And we did do financial assistance packages for local businesses to support sort of profit loss. We paid out over £1 million overall in doing that to help maintain local areas whilst the works were going on. But they were long periods of disruption, and we put some temporary car parks in, did a lot of PR. We ran competitions to try and encourage people to local shops, ran special days to encourage people there, but it was a difficult time. And also residentially, that this is Lower Road, Fletcher Road, which is just in Beeston on the end of University Boulevard. There was some really big impacts there because of the ground conditions. Effectively, had to build a structure underground to take the weight of the tram structure, and so that led to sort of roads being dug up for months on end, and I think it was quite challenging for local people in that area for that period of time. And then Chill Road again, really narrow and quite difficult. One thing that Alstom did do in that period was, rather than use the traditional track laying process, which is quite labour intensive and slow, they did use something they called their sort of APITRAC system, which effectively was a sort of a methodology which had sort of automated insertion of trap fasteners into sort of a concrete slab. So using sort of a sliding machine as shown sort of on that graphic, and that sort of did speed up the track laying to some degree, but you still have to sort of prepare the ground the same way before and come back afterwards. So it probably only saved sort of 20% or so of time in that period, but it did sort of just help to just speed it up a bit, because I think traditional track laying is really really labour intensive. But I mean, things may have moved on again, but at the time, this was sort of probably the most efficient way that it could have been done. And then just moving on to structures. So there was, as I said, there were several structures built on the system. Probably the two main ones at Nottingham Station and at the QMC. So at the station, there was a link from the Line 1 terminus over the station on the alignment of the Great Central Railway Bridge, can be seen here. In fact, some of the foundations from that bridge were used in the former bridge were used in the structure, and it was fairly unusual that it was built over a live operating station. There was a sort of a deck built between the platforms and the new viaducts to allow that work to take place at the same time. Needed a lot of negotiation with Network Rail, as you can imagine, and the new sort of bridge was slid in. It was built on that site just to the south of the station, and then it was slid in two phases over several weeks overnight. So it would move sort of a couple of meters a night, on the jacks that you can see in that left-hand picture. We sort of lifted up, moved along, put down. It actually got highlighted on the One Show, which I'm sure is about to start if you're at home, but because it used for its it just used margarine and ferry liquid as part of its lubrication for that to work, which seemed to be something that the One Show was interested in for some reason. The work was done overnight, as I say, and at the time, our director actually lived in that block of flats you can see on that left-hand picture just to the left. So we would get regular reports when when this work was happening, and yeah, a very grumpy director as a consequence. But overall, the structure is about 210 meters long there, and as I say, it was two sets of two phases that eventually was pulled across the station and linked into the existing viaduct. And there you can see sort of the viaduct that's there now just has been built. So I'm actually talking from that building just to the right there, the Loxley House, which is just outside here. Wilford Toll Bridge, another one, that's a listed structure. So we had to be careful with what we did with that. So essentially, that was just widened to allow the tram corridor to be built, but also to ensure that there was room for a full cycle and walkway alongside. So the pilasters on the structure, which you can see there, they had to be shaved back and got approval for that through the public inquiry. So that structure, I think, works well as a effectively cycle, foot, pedestrian and tram bridge. And then Lenton Lane, that was a bridge that was sort of driven in one morning, a Sunday morning. So the railway sort of between Nottingham and Beeston was shut to allow that, and it was driven in by sort of 4 times 40 wheel vehicle, which I think is called a propelled modular transporter. Don't think there's many of those around, and yeah, so we had the whole day for that, but it went in just a few hours. It was quite a smooth operation. Then at the QMC, so that was probably the largest structure. There's about 600 meters of ongoing structure there, from so coming out from Lenton Lane and Gregory Street over to the university. So there's a series of structures. The main ones are the bridge through the QMC site, which is about 220 meters long, and then the bridge over. I mean, it's basically reinforced concrete decks spanning the bridge piers. The piers were fabricated, the decks fabricated off site and transported and put up on site, and then so going from there over the A52 is this bowstring bridge, which is about 60 meters long, and that was again so put into place one evening. The A52 was closed, and it was again driven into site in a few hours. It was quite a it was it was a warm September evening when that happened, and there was a real atmosphere. Lots of local people came out to watch it, and there were games of football going on the A52. So it really became quite an interesting evening. But it was a very successful movement to the bridge. So it's obviously a twin bowstring arch structure. It's called the Ningbo Friendship Bridge. I think it was something that the university were keen to emphasise their links with Ningbo. They've got a campus there in China. So at the time, that was the decision taken. Just on the previous slide, on the bottom left there, approximately 18 months to 2 years after it's opened, a further structure was sort of bolted on, which is just a direct walkway from the tram stop into the QMC site at B level. And what that means, if you just walk through there and go straight on, you get to the main reception on the north side of the QMC building, straight from the tram stop. So that just gave it that extra sort of permeability that sort of you having to go downstairs, walk along and up. And on the right hand side, you can get straight into the day treatment centre as well, the tram stop. So it is the only sort of directly linked tram stop to a hospital in the country. Just to note one or two other, I'm nearly finished now, but one or two other interesting sort of details in the construction. So when the alignment was put through Queen's Walk, there used to be a double row of lime trees along there. Now, so the design really didn't allow for the inner row to survive, and they were taken out. New trees were sort of planted in their wake to sort of grow and take the place of the ones that are there at the moment when they die in years to come. But one of the local initiatives was to use the tree trunks to basically develop use a local carver to create a series of oh, I forgot what they're called now, but these are sort of placed up and down the meadows now so actually the wood and the lime trees were kept in the meadows to just to keep that local feel for what was done. And I think the locals were quite pleased to do this. So the carvings effectively kept the wood and the trees in the local area. And we got a lot of grief from local people in the construction of in the meadows through that side through that area at the time, but they actually came round to thinking actually it was a good thing for them when the system opened. And then just a couple more quickly, a couple more engineering bits of interest. So the Greenway through Chilwell had a real flooding issue before construction. So basically large boxes were built below the track to take basically to capture excess water and allow it to be gradually then released. So there were a lot of discussions with the Environment Agency to make sure that sufficient capacity, in fact excess capacity, was going to be built into the design. And so a whole series of sort of tanks, pipes and swales were built in, and it has worked well. There haven't been any issues along there in the years it's been operating. That was a success. And then on the embankment between sort of Ruddington Lane and Compton Acres, there was the full former railway embankment was taken out, and it did leave a very wide corridor, about 20 metres wide, and again that allowed quite a bit of planting to be put in, as well as the tram alignment, plus a cycleway and walkway again. But some of the predicted noise measurements before construction did suggest there could be a noise issue there for local people. So noise mats were put in under the track, along a long section of that alignment, just to suppress that noise. And then one final slide on construction was, I think one of the key issues is communication and talking to people. It's a really impactful thing, a tram construction in a city. You're just landing a railway system basically on an urban environment that isn't naturally built for it. So communicating with the people who are affected is really important. Property owners, landowners, businesses, everyone's affected, and I think we did as much as we could. We did have large resources, but I think there was an expectation of more information that wasn't realistic. That I think people were expecting to get daily updates on construction when it was in their area, and that perhaps wasn't realistic, and that's a lesson to be learned. But I think it's really important to, as much as possible, keep people on side to help. There were people going out who were just employed to liaise with local landowners, so community officers. There were 3 of those to try and help. I mean, mixed success, I'd say, but it's a really important area in any future schemes. So just to finish off, really, future tram extensions. Well, I think one of the main concerns of the COVID period is that obviously the economics of tram systems has altered with the lower patronage and the higher costs. So I think business cases need to be refreshed and looked at, but the ambition remains to develop the system. And you may be aware separately that the local councils in the area, it's Nottingham, Nottinghamshire, Derby and Derbyshire, are looking at a potential combined authority, putting a mayor in place, and potentially having mayoral elections in May 2024. One of the main reasons to do that is that public transport would go into the mayoral authority, and it would allow access to sort of funding streams that other combined authorities such as the West Midlands, Greater Manchester have already got, which would really open the door potentially to getting funding to start looking seriously at tram extensions. At the moment, there just isn't the funding there to do that. And if you did that, I think these are really the extensions that we'd look at. So you'd look at principally an extension to the east. It's the main sort of part of the city you could access by tram that hasn't currently got a system. So that's how, sort of via Daleside Road, critically through all the waterside development sites there that are there, potentially across the river to a park and ride site in Rushcliffe. That could be potentially crossing somewhere near Gampston, or potentially further out towards Radcliffe, and then going up to development site at Gedling. So this would all be linked to new development sites potentially. And then going west, the other potential development would be to link into HS2 should that come through. I mean, at the moment, it's been talked about going to Sutton to Parkway Station, the East Midlands Parkway Station. We'd have to look at the business case for that. I think previously when it was proposed at Towton, there was only a 1 kilometre extension proposed, and that would have made a lot of sense. But the proposals for HS2 are for trains actually to partly extend into Nottingham city centre as well, to Nottingham station from the Parkway, which may make a tram extension less appealing when you've probably got a 4-mile gap there between Clifton and Parkway. Again, it may depend what happens to the power station site and potential for links to the airport. So you could get a package which might make a tram extension feasible. But I think the idea is that two HS2 trains an hour would go into Nottingham if it ever happened, and that might make the tram extension perhaps less appealing than the potential extension originally proposed at Towton. But I think if the combined authority does get developed and new funding sources are there and HS2 happens, then you'd look at the Parkway corridor and you'd look at the extension principally to the east of the city out towards Gedling and the waterside side. The extension to the north to Kimberley, potentially a development, potentially a extension there, although I think the geography is difficult there. I think some of the developments are difficult to penetrate the centre. So I think that would very much be third on the list, but it is a possibility. And then just to the north there to Hucknall, there are potentially substantial developments coming there at Widebend Farm, to north of Hucknall. If that development happened, you could look at that, but I think that's probably again further down the line. It's probably the two east and west of the city, which are the main ones. So that's it really. I hope that was interesting. Yeah, and I guess it's back over to any questions really.
Thank you, Steve. Everybody's very, very quiet. I wonder if that. I'm hoping that's because everybody's been muted. So, some very interesting challenges there. It's very difficult. Just appreciate the difficulties in making such a huge investment in some fixed infrastructure, given the massive social changes over the last few years, and not to mention the sort of the moving the goalpost with regards to HS2 as well, and certainly the extension to Towton, very much a great plan given the original intention to put the HS2 station at Towton. But yes, I can see must be frustrating the dithering, but the change being proposed there. Yes.
Yeah, and I think one of the key issues there is actually how you fit HS2 into Nottingham Station if it is to come. There isn't the space to just add the necessary platforms alongside the current layout. So I think they are doing some quite serious thinking about just how you would manage that constrained area, which I think is sort of the current focus of work in this area. So I think we're quite a way off sort of understanding how all that's going to work if it does indeed ever materialise. There obviously got to be some doubts around that.
Just a quick query from me. That's from I mean, very much memories of the line one design. Was it ever considered to link the current railway station directly with the Victoria Centre underneath the city, rather than going through the Market Square at all? It seems we've already got the old tunnel that went through to Nottingham Victoria. It seems to me would be quite useful to have a fast link underneath the city.
Yeah, I think there was a bit of, I think this is going back 20, 25 years. I think they did look at at the tunnels that are under city, and actually going out to the northeast as well.
Mm.
I think one of the problems was the fact that land between some of the tunnels had been developed, which made that very difficult. Another one was that the the rolling stock the line one rolling stock actually can't be used in tunnels for fire safety reasons, although that may have been potentially overcome, I guess, if if there'd been a requirement for that. And I think also probably potentially the cost issues, in that the line one sort of its business case sort of got in by a whisker. The cost benefit analysis, it really was on the line, and I think any extra costs such as that, I don't think it would have flown, to be honest. So I think, yeah, Victoria Centre tunnels were looked at and potentially could yet be used, if you were going to take a line east. But I think the problem is you can't get that full alignment using tunnels sufficiently to develop a route.
Thank you. I noticed that two hands have gone up. Chris and Colin. I'm not sure who was first, but Chris is on the left. So Chris, Chris Parker, would you like to ask a question, please?
Yes, it's an interesting one from a personal point of view, because you commented, Steve, about the difficulties of building this thing through Beeston and Clifton particularly, and I know from personal experience that it was a hell of a thing for the people in both those places, and particularly Beeston, which I'm very familiar with because I had relatives living there at the time.
Yeah,
there was a huge amount of moaning going on. It was very unpopular. Have you done any work to look at how people's views have changed now that the tram's in there? Because I'm absolutely sure that they'll love it now it's there. But have you checked to see what they think?
If we're honest, we haven't. It would have been a slightly an "I told you so" type sort of. So what we have done is we've done an evaluation. We have to do that for DFT, effectively a 1 and 5 year evaluation of the scheme, and that does involve general surveys, not specifically. So people who it doesn't go back to the people who, as you say, may be directly affected. I think there's a lot of churn as well. But the general view is that that the schemes are popular. The scheme is popular and welcome in those areas, but it may not. I think one of the real issues was that I think the effect was very harsh on a relatively small number of people. I think a lot of people were able to circumnavigate it, but if you're actually on the line of route, it's ever so difficult. And if you had to get into the town centres of those periods, that was very difficult. But lots of people in those areas learnt to not do that for a period of time, and now they welcome it. So we haven't actually been able to isolate those particular people, if we're honest. But we didn't. Almost straight away, the dynamics changed when it was operating, and I think generally, people now, well, the impression we get, I can't say this scientifically, but the impression we get is that apart from if you're living directly on the route, it's welcome in the local area and it's added to it. You look at Beeston Town Centre now. I mean, that came the difference in that central area has come about on the back of the tram. There's been substantial development in the centre of Clifton as well. Two development sites have come up, so I think it has enhanced the local environment. And I think we found at Beeston more people go into the tram stop than come out from it. The number of users. So I think it's helped to boost the local town centre as well. So
that's certainly the impression I've got from talking to people who live there, and certainly there was a huge increase, as far as I can see, in the value of houses in Beeston following on from it as well. So I think people are pretty chuffed actually now.
Yes, and it was interesting that that we had a huge number of what they're called Part 1 claims, which are claims where if you think the value of your property is reduced as a consequence of the scheme, you get there's basically a 7-year claim period, and that period ended just last year. I mean, there were no claims that
Interesting.
successful, which suggests that if you're directly affected, your property didn't lose value. And I think if you just go out from, say, a street or 2 streets out from that, it's definitely something that's beneficial, and I mean, estate agents use it as a promotional aspect on the properties all the time. So I think it's a half answer, I think, there. But...
No, it's a very good answer. I think it's perfectly valid. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Chris. Colin, you've got your hand up as well, so
yes, I have indeed. Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. I'm going to set the scene first of all. Clifton Centre, for anybody who doesn't know, is an island platform, and then country end of it, if you like, there's a turnback siding, and it's on street is the turnback siding. I presume that's for perturbed operations and then just returning back to the city centre. But every time I've driven past it, there's always cars parked on this turnback siding, because it's apparent to my eyes that it's a turnback siding, but I think to the average member of the public, it's not. Now, I've just seen also that they've now put yellow lines around this turnback siding. Cars still park on it, mind. But anyway, that's a bit of a preamble to my question, really, which is, you did mention about challenges. But if you had a magic wand, and what would be the top 3 things that would make life better for the tram system?
Oh, that's a good question. Things that make it better. That's a good question. Yeah. I think one of them we wouldn't have. One of them is a design issue on line 1, which has caused massive problems. That I don't know if you know the section in Hyson Green, where it goes one way up and down Knoll Street and Bradford Road, and in the lead up to line 1, there was a public inquiry, and the local shops on Hyson Green traders argued they wanted people coming in. They wanted the inbound to be on the shopping street, because they thought people would be more likely to get out, shop, and get back on again. Whereas if you're going outbound, you wouldn't get off because you had your day, you're tired. So we actually swapped the tracks, and so created this diamond track formation on Knoll Street, which has been an absolute nightmare. It's been a nightmare for the residents, because effectively when the tracks go over, when the vehicles go over each other, it clunks.
Yeah.
So there's a noise there, and it's really hard on the points, and so it's had to be replaced a number of times, and it will have to be replaced again. So I'd say that was a real mistake in the design, because it means that sort of in August every few years you have to close that section down for a period, which is unfortunate. So I'd say that's definitely a design flaw. What else? I'm struggling to think, to be honest. What I think a second one actually we would have done is a topical one, and one you'll be familiar with, Colin, is that we tried to get it later but failed, and they're now building an Aldi on it. So there's a just by the Beckett School.
Oh yes, yeah.
We should have put a park and ride site in. I think perhaps at the time there was quite a lot of opposition in that area, and I think maybe we chickened out of adding that to the views locally, where I think they didn't really want it. And it would have been a perfect site for a park and ride, and we didn't do it. And now we can't get, we'd have used a compulsory purchase order to achieve it, but it's now actually, I think work's just started on a.
It's ongoing
orbit.
now. Yeah, it's just started.
So that's a real shame. We've kept our eye on the site, hoping to put a park and ride in there, but I think the moment's gone, unfortunately. So that's a regret. But I can't think of a third offhand, but that's certainly a couple. What about you? Have you got a view on that? What we might have done better? Because you're a local resident to it.
I am. I mean, I really enjoyed travelling by tram. I certainly fit the profile that I don't travel as much by tram because I'm doing a lot more working from home. But no, I think it's a great system. A lot of integration with other, buses and other modes of transport as well. I find it great. I thought you might answer something about road drivers, basically being a bit inconsiderate and leaving cars here and there, and the tram, obviously, as people know, can't move and dodge things, and the public actually in the city centre, I guess, on a Saturday night in particular, I'm guessing is a bit of a hairy time, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't think though that I would have changed the design though for those reasons. I can't think of I mean, one thing we might have thought of is going through Clifton. We could have gone to the Nottingham Trent University rather than extend onto Lark Hill. That was a design option, but we actually took the hard design choices. So I think I showed a picture of a residential street where it was horribly dug up on the edge of Beeston. Now, one option we had was we could have gone down Queen's Road. So if you get to the end of University Boulevard, you could have gone left down Queen's Road and into Beeston that way, but you'd have just been in the traffic all the way, and that's exactly what you shouldn't do. You've got to take these hard decisions. If you're going to spend so much money on a really a top-notch, high-quality system, you've got to stay off street or on quiet roads. So be honest, we inconvenience people on that road, although I think quite a lot of it is sort of is student accommodation. It's become more and more, to be honest. But so we took the hard decision to inconvenience a small number of people to make a really good system and not make, if it's stuck in traffic, what's the point? It's not going to be reliable and punctual. So I think mostly we did get difficult alignment decisions right, I think, to be honest. Again, partly because I think we took those hard decisions because perhaps the politics allowed that. We had real champions on the political arena who were prepared to take those decisions.
Good, thank you.
Okay, right, last few seconds to ask questions. Now I'm going to just go through some of the comments on the meeting chat. One from Jerry Ricketts, a circular link from the Beeston Arm via HS2/Toton to Derby Centre and Station to EMA and back to Clifton Arm would be hugely appreciated.
Just on that, we have actually got an alignment for when HS2 was proposed at Toton. We have an alignment right into Derby city centre. We have, we did the work. So I think that was really real shame that I think that work got knocked out really by taking HS2 away from that. I think HS2 for the business case had to be there for that work to progress. Yeah. So it could come back in the future. Don't see it anytime soon, unfortunately, but it's through Pride Park, sort of up under the main shop, I forget what it's called now, the main shopping centre.
The Into Centre.
The Into Centre, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
under it's that. Not now. It's Derby on now, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Derby on. Yeah.
Yeah. Right up to where the main area where the old theatre used to be, past the civic buildings. So it was a good alignment, actually. I thought it was a good, from a route design point of view. So I think that might come back at some stage, but it's not the moment with HS2 going.
Great. One from Ismail. Thank you very much for this most fascinating and comprehensive presentation. In addition to the challenges from an engineering perspective, the details you shared are the most fascinating to regular passengers of the network. Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Similar comment from Chris. Very interesting presentation. Many thanks, Steve. And one from Matt Frost. Thanks, Steve. I need to go, but very good. Dr. Coles says he now approves, I'm told, last time Steve B saw him.
Yeah, he lives on Humber Road. Yes, Dr. Coles. Yes. Yeah, well, that's good. Well, that answers your question from earlier. Oh, sorry, not yours. One of your colleagues. Is it Chris's comment, I think, earlier about a local who came to the inquiry to object, perhaps came round. Yeah, he did a lot of work on the noise impacts. But, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Steve. The only thing I've got to, no more questions. I've just got to hand over to Colin for the vote of thanks.
Hi, Steve. Thank you very much for that. Great presentation, great content and so on. And I was particularly interested in one slide when you were talking about the Nottingham Station viaduct, and the one where you were looking more or less along the viaduct and said Loxley House is where I am now. Well, on the left of that same photograph was the Granby Hotel, I think, which has now been knocked down roughly in COVID times. But the Granby Hotel was the inaugural meeting of the PWI, was held in 1884. So we've got we've got an anniversary, 140 years since that inaugural meeting next year, which will coincide with the 20th anniversary of the tram. So we've got a joint celebration to have on that score. So
Excellent.
Who needs any other excuse? No, but yeah, thank you very much for your talk. You went through the history of trams, showed us that picture in 1909, talked about COVID and things like there's so much to cover. I can't pick everything, but interesting to hear that timetabling might change because of the way people are working now. And a very thorough explanation of all the construction works and challenges and utilities and so on, operations of the tram system, and finally talking about the future opportunities and how they now have to be rephrased as well because of changed travel patterns. All in all, a great evening. I hope that people can unmute, maybe even show the faces on camera, and maybe we can muster a round of applause in the usual way. Thank you very much, Steve.
Cheers. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Steve. And for those who are still here, hopefully see you in person if the venue doesn't let us down. Hopefully they won't on the Thursday the 25th of May, not Wednesday, for the Warrington grade separation at the Aston Court in Derby from 5 o'clock for 5:30 start. Thank you very much.
Very good. Great. Enjoy your curry tonight, Steve.
Yes, yes. I'm going to. Yes, you should come, Colin. You should come.
I've got to be up early in the morning. I'm sorry. Send my apologies, Steve.
Yes, I will do. Will do. See you later. Yeah.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye then.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.